Hey, Thomas DeMonico is launching a new fragrance. This time it's a citrus-focused fragrance, but very much fitting of the DNA of the Thomas DeMonico collection of fragrances. It's called Ultima Storia. I'm here to tell you all about it, and then also two of his limited edition fragrances are now gone into the original collection, or the regular collection. Those two are Coeur and Beau. I'm going to tell you all about these coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sebastian. Are you familiar with Thomas DeMonico fragrances? You know I'm a fan of this one right here. Look at this. I've used up quite a bit. Really love that stuff. Really, really amazing. It still happens to be my favorite in the collection. But there's a really nice citrusy fragrance now that's launching called Ultima Storia. And by the time this video airs, it should be out or, launching very soon at a retailer near you that the Thomas DeMonico fragrances are sold. If you recall, going back to when I first reviewed Raw Gold, it was in a bottle like this. They were launched as limited edition, and then they moved into a collection like this, and they're part of a permanent collection of fragrances, which is what's going on with Coeur, and this is the new version right here. And then we've got the original Beau, and then this is the new version right here. So they're no longer limited edition. These bottles, if there's any out there still, they're available to purchase, but they're part of the regular collection now. But let's talk about Ultima Storia first, and I'll tell you everything I know about the other fragrances in the collection. So Ultima Storia is about to launch, if it hasn't launched yet. Features notes of Citron Noir, which is black lemon. Features almonds, roasted coffee, Pear, Orris Absolute, Clearwood, Saffian leather, talcum, and linen. I feel like this fragrance is very different from everything else in the collection. Also the freshest, and also the most mass appealing for sure. So if you felt like the Thomas DeMonico fragrances were a bit too much, especially Raw Gold, my favorite of the collection, this one I think you can try and, use and wear and things like that and appreciate, and then slowly graduate to the other fragrances. As I said, there's definitely a DNA running throughout the fragrances. It fits and it's cohesive with the collection. Different smell, but there is a DNA that's running throughout the fragrances, and I can connect the fragrances from one to the other. But again, this one's a bit more mass appealing. It should satisfy a lot of folks who are into niche fragrances, but they're uncomfortable with extremely niche offerings. They want to slowly graduate to experiencing more niche fragrances when they're mostly familiar with designers. So this does have a note called Citron Noir. It's black lemons. In the Middle East, there is such a thing as black lemons, and it's quite citrusy for me. And I'm not sure what that black lemons or Citron Noir is adding. Maybe a slight smokiness, a little bit of darkness, because it's not uber bright for me. But the fragrance is extremely powdery. It's a very powdery fragrance. In fact, it kind of looks like an offspring of Sol Solgado to me, minus the linden blossom. There is a linen note in this. There's also talcum. It's a talcum powder. There's the Orris. So it's quite powdery. But there are ambery touches when it's drying down, slight leathery touches. And then along the way, you've got nuttiness from the almonds. And maybe there's even some heliotrope in here, because I get that, because heliotrope does add a slight powdery effect. Not even slight, mostly a powdery effect to fragrances. Also having an almondy edge. And then the roasted coffee in here. It's not very, very prominent, but it's in the background. You'll kind of notice it. So it's a powdery take on citruses, and it's not very similar to a lot of citruses out there. So I feel like it's a very original offering, while being a very universally appreciated. So I think people should be able to embrace this fragrance because it's easier to wear than the other fragrances. In the end, it's a citrus, but there are things thrown in here that are not in your typical conventional citrus fragrances. First off, it's powdery. As I said, there's a lot of powdery touches here, the Orris and the talcum. And then there's a lot of other things going on with it. There is a slight bit of fruitiness in this as well. There is a bit of pear in here. And I find pear to have a juicy effect in fragrances, but the fragrance is very, very powdery. So I think it kind of like takes away from the juiciness of the pear, but there is a slight fruitiness in the fragrance. Let's quickly smell it, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about Ultima Storia. I don't know if you guys have already sampled it. I actually sampled this during Essence earlier this year. So when you first spray it, there's a juiciness there, and I think the powdery effect happens as it's settling on your skin. So it's not necessarily extremely powdery when you first spray it, because you do get that citrusy juiciness effect up top. But it gets powdery, nutty, and of course ambery when it's drying down. It's an amber woody dry down for me. And along the way you get a light leathery touch for sure. And then the coffee shows up, then the nuttiness shows up. I think it's a very pleasant fragrance, and it should satisfy anybody that's into citrusy fragrances, but they don't want something straightforward citrus. There's a lot of things happening in here, and you'll notice them. You'll notice the nuttiness, you'll notice the coffee, slight fruitiness from the pear, while all along being a powdery fragrance and then settling to a leathery, ambery, woody thing in the dry down. For me, it's not my most favorite of the collection. I still prefer Raw Gold. I'm in love with this fragrance. As you can see, I've used quite a bit. I also really love Sol Solgado, even Fuego Futuro, but for me, the two favorites are Sol Solgado, and I cannot forget Au Coeur. Au Coeur is also a favorite of mine. I haven't used a lot of this because I know it was a limited edition, so I wanted to keep it, but now that it's out as a regular collection, the main collection, I can start using this one. So if you don't know Au Coeur, Au Coeur was the second fragrance that came out after Raw Gold, and when I smelled both of them side by side, I felt like they were connected, like they were part of a collection, and they were offsprings, or it had similar DNA. For me, the Au Coeur has a lot more floral touches, so it doesn't have that honeyed, slight animalic touch that the original Raw Gold had, but there is a honeyed effect happening in there. It's sweet and honeyed, but with a lot of Magnolia. There's the pink pepper in there, so it's very peppery. It also has the Ambroxan. Its slight rosiness comes in as well. It's quite gorgeous and very long lasting for a different kind of a freshie. For me, I prefer Au Coeur over Ultima Storia, but I think Ultima Storia people should be satisfied with it, because there's a lot of folks that like citrusy fragrances and a unique takes on citruses, or freshies I should say. For me, Ultima Storia is a freshie, but when I'm wearing it, it doesn't really act like a freshie because there's a lot going on with it. Plus there's the fact that it's powdery and it has the amber, leather, woods in the dry down. It's a lot more complex than your straightforward fresh fragrance. Also a little bit about Grand Beau. This is the original release, limited edition release. Now it's part of the regular collection. As you can see, the bottles are very similar. I felt like Grand Beau was the most masculine in the collection. Now we also have Fuego Futuro, which is quite masculine as well, but I still consider Grand Beau to be the most masculine. It's a vegetal green, rooty, powdery fragrance. Very aromatic and spicy at the same time, and it is kind of reminiscent of French Lover from Frederic Malle, and fragrances like that, kind of green, vegetal, powdery, galbanum-y kind of greenness. I don't think this has galbanum in it. It's more Angelica, and I feel like the vegetal powdery effect that's in here kind of reminds me a little bit of galbanum. But it's quite masculine. It's about vetiver, and there's juniper in here as well. It's musky notes, pine, Ambrette, and things like that. So it's very aromatic, it's very green and woody. It's quite masculine, as I said, and I think this has fans out there. If you haven't tried the Grand Beau, check it out, especially if you like fragrances like French Lover and things like that. They're definitely very masculine leaning and also powdery, vegetal, green leaning as well. And then if you don't know Raw Gold, please catch some of my older videos. It happens to be one of my favorite fragrances within the last 4 years. In the 2020s. It's a fantastic honeyed patchouli resins, a little bit lipsticky, kind of makeup-y kind of leather fragrance. Really amazing, really long lasting. There's also resins in here. There's powdery notes and things like that. It smells super fantastic and definitely great trail. Really nice projection and very, very long lasting. So it's a great fragrance to wear. Really love the way it smells. It's a fantastic fragrance. And of course it has patchouli. Notes like that I really love. The dry down is more ambery. There's benzoin and vanillic notes, so it creates an ambery effect. But it's such an amazing fragrance to wear. If you don't know it, do check it out, Raw Gold. And then Sol Solgado is all about linden blossom. I've mentioned in videos recently that linden blossom is kind of having a moment. I discovered linden blossom in real life recently, within the last 2 or 3 years. And I fell in love with the smell, so I was out on the hunt for linden blossom focused fragrances, and then this launched like a year after. I got my experience with the Linden Blossom, and it is a Linden Blossom bomb. The smell is so intoxicating in air, and here they've done such a great job with this fragrance. It happens to be my second favorite from the house now, but Coeur was competing with this one for a while, but I absolutely love this, and I think people seem to love this as well. It smells really, really fantastic. You do have the DNA in here of the fragrances of Thomas DeMonaco, but it's such a nicely executed fragrance. I love it. It's honeyed because there are honey touches with Linden Blossom. So there's ambery touches in here, but it's very powdery and floral, yellow floral, green floral effect happening in this. Really fantastic offering if you don't know it. Sol Salgado is amazing from this house. And then Fuego Futuro is, for me, the experience of taking a hike in the foothills of Northern California in the autumn. It smells of sagebrush baking under the sun in dry heat. That's captured here. In fact, my barber actually wears this. I turned him on to raw gold. He had a bottle of that. He's worn it. Now he started wearing the Fuego Futuro. He seems to love it. And he seems to like this house. So I think next up, I think it might be for him to try Sol Salgado. But this is definitely that kind of an idea. For me, I've taken a lot of hikes in the foothills of California, Northern California, in Indian summer, in the autumn, when it's, hot still, but it's dry. And when you're walking through, you get that smell of the land, the earth, and all the growth there, because they're all dried up, but there's a fragrance on them. This fragrance acts like that. It's woody, it's aromatic, it's spicy, and smoky at the same time. Don't think of California fires, but it's an amazing fragrance too. Although this is like my third or fourth fragrance from the collection, favorite fragrance from the collection. And for me still, Thomas DeMonaco's Raw Gold is a fantastic fragrance. I love it, and I can't get enough of it. But if you haven't tried Ultima Storia, please do and see what you think about it. Again, I think it's the one that's going to be the crowd pleaser. People seem to like these kind of fragrances, and it's one fragrance that you can embrace a lot easier than something like Raw Gold, especially when you haven't had too much experience in the niche world. But it should also satisfy folks that are looking for a freshie but not necessarily straightforward citruses and woods. This does go through a lot of different things throughout the lifetime of the fragrance, and a lot of unique things happen with the notes here, eventually settling to the amber woody leather kind of a dry down. But the Citron Noir or black lemons, in the Middle East when I was there, I noticed that the Middle Eastern markets were selling the Citron Noir, the black lemons. They're a little bit like charcoal, like burned lemons, but it's used in the cuisine. So perhaps that's what's going on in here. But it's pretty pleasant fragrance here. So it's Ultima Storia from the house of Thomas DeMonaco. And don't forget the re-releases of Coeur and Beau as well, now part of the original collection. But let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Are you curious to get your nose on Ultima Storia? Do let me know. Put a comment down below. And thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. And one last thing I should say is the fragrances are now sold. All of them are selling at ZGO Perfumery. So if you're in town, you can go visit and check them out there, or they're linked in the info box as well. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.